We've invited, I think, 3 of the most interesting industrial design and product design firms in the Bay Area to talk about design for circularity, which is a concept that's like quite controversial. Like, what is circularity? What is sustainability? Are either of those things dirty words? And so we're going to have each of them talk a little bit about their practices and what they're seeing in their work that they think is inspiring. Talk a little bit about like the urgency around that work, and then be in discussion with Tyler moderating, kind of about differing approaches, et cetera. So welcoming to the stage, Nichole. Nichole is the creative director and founder of Level, which is an ID shop based right in the Mission. Level was named one of the top 10, I think it's most innovative companies by Fast Company. I think there were only 10 companies, I think just behind Adidas and Google, which is kind of an incredible accolade, and is also one of the only women-led shops that kind of exist at this level. And so super proud to have Nichole here with us. Thanks, Nichole.
I'm really proud and excited to be here and kind of share my story. It's just been a great event, so inspired by everybody else that has attended and been a part of this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my studio before diving right into the discussion on sustainability. So I kind of came from a small town in the Midwest about 20 years ago, made my way to California because it's sort of just always been in my heart and soul to build and make things. And coming out to Silicon Valley, where I was educated as a designer and have spent 20 years of my career learning how to create and build things. So always been a part of technology and at the forefront of innovation from my early days designing the very first Fitbit that ever existed to some of the earliest Android and Windows phones that made their way into the world. And now, since I started my own studio 5 years ago, I'm really focused on how I can take what I've learned in designing technology devices and do that for better. So really focused on how we can weave sustainability, life-saving medical devices, things of that nature into the studio and the work that we do, and dedicate my life to using technology for good. But as we take a look at circularity and design for sustainability, I wanted to take a step back and sort of realize what helped us to get here and what we have to kind of clean up after. This, was from the 1950s when plastic was really making waves, and it's unfortunate, but this is the reality of what got us here. Is just there were people celebrating that throwaway culture, that it's totally fine to just use plastic and toss it in the garbage. It makes life so much easier. But that's where what's brought us to this state as a planet and as humanity. And just a few years back, my now 8-year-old came home from her first day of her new school at the age of 4. She had created a piece of art for me. When I was that age, I remember drawing, fish and dolphins. And she came home showing me the plastic islands that are living in our oceans. And to me, it was just one of the most heartbreaking experiences that I've ever felt. This is not the life that I want for our children and for our future generations. And so this is what I'm doing every day. I get out of bed and I love going to my studio so that I can use my skills and knowledge to make this better and hopefully provide a better future for everyone. And as a designer, I feel that we have a lot of responsibility. Showing this video here, I'm sure most of us out there have, Apple products, so it's not just about Apple, but I spent many years of my career working in factories, going to China at least once a month, my boots on the ground, learning what it takes to make products, learning what used to be celebrated is how we can take these raw materials from the earth and use tons of energy to process them and bathe them in chemicals to insert mold plastic and metals together that can never come apart, to co-mold plastics and rubbers, and then all that takes all the energy and consumption and carbon that's created in making making those products and shipping them all over the world just to last a few years. And this is what I've learned, but this is not what I want to continue doing in my future, and that is partly what's driven me to start my own studio and to keep my studio really small so that I can have an 8-person team that really focuses on doing good. So we don't have to take in projects just to keep the lights on that don't really align with our values. I'm dedicating my time and my team to doing things that are going to change the planet in a positive direction. And I did want to bring this up for those of you who are not designers. This here is kind of what Dieter Rams, who's considered kind of a godfather of design, even back in the 1950s or 70s when he wrote the 10 Principles of Design. I would say when you go to most ID schools and many industrial design studios, these will be posted on the walls as principles that we must follow as designers. And I do think at the time that Dieter Rams wrote these principles that they were really valuable, and he has inspired Apple, he has inspired huge companies and so many products. He's an amazing person, but times have changed a lot. And I think it's time that we change the principles of design for the planet that we're living on today and the times that we're living through. And so I've kind of created what I think are 5 new principles of design that I think will influence things in a better direction. And through that, I'm also showcasing a few of the projects that we're working on at Level. This is not our project, but I'm starting with the collaboration between Allbirds and Adidas here, which I love because they're actually putting the a numeric valuation behind the carbon footprint of the product and using design as a way to celebrate that, but also to educate people, because I think consumers cannot make better choices if they don't know how bad the products are that they're buying. So we need to be able to tell consumers how bad the products are. What is that life cycle analysis? Like, what is the carbon that is emitted in creating that product and getting it to your home or into your life? So I think that's a great example of how it's done well, and that we should be doing that for every product that exists. I'm going to talk a little about Sum is a client that we've just started working with this year, probably one of the most exciting products that I've been a part of recently. And I really love this product because of the fact that they are working on a hydration system that's going to replace the use of single-use plastic. And in 2021, there were 50 billion single-use plastic bottles that were created just in 1 year. So this is a massive problem and something that I think really does need to change, because the beverage industry is destroying the earth. That is so much waste. And of those 50 billion plastic bottles, it's only about 9% that end up being recycled, and the rest of them are going to live on this planet for 400 years or more. It's just devastating to this world. So I'm really excited to be working with a client that's very forward-thinking on how we can get people to bring their own bottle and create a system, because there's absolutely no reason why I need to be drinking a San Pellegrino that's been shipped all the way from the other side of the world. It's just not a sustainable business. Another client that we're working with, really interesting, that we're sort of in a library here, because Biblioteca came to us last year to help them rethink the world of libraries. And that's actually not a place where I thought there would be the most innovation and sustainability happening. But interestingly enough, they're owned by 3M, a very future-thinking in what they're building. But they build the entire infrastructure of how books are checked out, how books are restored on shelves in 30,000 libraries around the world, in 22 different countries. So they have a pretty large footprint, and we're building new systems with them where they're going to be localizing manufacturing. So wherever the library systems are going to be bought and used, they're going to be creating in those countries using 3D printing technology, which is pretty amazing, so that they're not making molds for each of these. They're able to adapt and update their systems on the fly. And the really big and inspiring part about the product that I love is that all of the resin is castor bean based. So PA11, also called nylon 11. The raw product comes from a castor bean, and in case you're not aware about castor bean oil, but it's a very sustainably farmed product where it uses very little water. No deforestation is used in creating the product. So at its heart, it's a bio-based resin, fully recyclable, and comes without with little damage to the earth and requires little water to grow. So pretty amazing to be working on products and learning so much about supply chain and how to make improvements through that. And then the last product I want to bring up is Tempo. This is actually one that's launched. And Tempo's near and dear to my heart because we began working with them when we were just a 3-person team, and they were 2 people. Recently just raised another $220 million, so they've grown to a 200-plus person team, really successful in the in-home fitness space. We designed the first product with them when they were very early stage startup. That's what you see over there on the left. And it's been a great success because they launched just before the pandemic when in-home fitness started really taking off. But that is a massive product, 6 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide. It takes a lot to ship that across the world into consumers' homes. So what we did is to kind of take away all the things that were as much as we could so that you can still get that experience without it being so damaging. So their second generation product, which we just launched with them in November, actually uses a consumer's existing TV and existing iPhone. So that the carbon footprint that you get from screens is actually really terrible. In some other products where we've done a life cycle analysis, the screen alone was 90% of the footprint of the product. So by taking away the screen, you actually can drastically reduce the impact, as well as making the product much more compact and fitting much more seamlessly into people's living rooms, taking up a lot more space. So this really kind of grew their customer base. About like over 80% of sales now are going to the Move, so made a big shift in Tempo's market. And I'm going to end on this slide about packaging here. What I think is important to look at is how designers have influenced packaging for good, and I think that we can do the same thing in hardware. I mean, there used to be many years ago that people would put plastic, like, this clear plastic cases, the jewel cases that we would sell products, and it's unbelievable that was a thing. But over the years, we've seen all these white shiny boxes with magnets in them, and inks and everything that is completely unrecyclable. And I love the shift that we're seeing happening, where it's just raw cardboard, much more easy to recycle. So I think if we've been able to kind of shift the mindset and shift consumer impressions in the packaging world, I think we can do the same with cardboard and hardware, allowing people to kind of like accept different materials, accept more rawness, if it makes it more recyclable and better for this planet. And I'm going to end on this, and there's a quote from John Doerr. John Doerr just made a huge contribution to Stanford. This week it was announced $1.1 billion to set up a climate change education center at Stanford. So he's an amazing inspiration. I highly recommend reading his book, Speed and Scale. Actually, when we kicked off the project with some, they mailed Vicki and I the book to read. So, but he talks about how impelled we are to, after seeing this orange sky. Many of you who might have been here on that day in California, we cannot just sit back and let the things continue as is. This is just not acceptable. So.
Thanks. And joining us on the stage, Bret Recor. So Bret is an industrial designer, entrepreneur, investor, and founder of Box Clever. He's a creative director at Box Clever. I also love the creative director thread we got going today. It's like very legit. And Boxclever was another company in the top 10 of the Fast Company's most innovative companies in design. So really proud to have you both here. And Boxclever is an industrial design and brand studio based in San Francisco, but also does work globally. So Bret, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome work, Nichole. It's always fun to follow up. It's great to be here. I love the initiative, love what we're all doing. So I just want to touch base on a few things. I'm going to probably not go as long. I want to try to compress it a little bit and get into the discussion. But I'll start off with just one thing that we're emphasizing in the studio right now is our approach to, I'm not going to use sustainability, I'm going to use environmental impact. So one thing that we've been pushing a lot on is circular design. And it's kind of a questionable movement. People don't know what's really happening, how to really engage. But one of the things that we've been doing for the whole duration of the company, we've been hard at it for 10 years. And the products that we're actually pushing forward, we're trying to get every engagement to make the right move. And it's not easy. So we only can do so much, but throughout the years, we've engaged in different types of industry. We specialize in doing everything from furniture all the way to consumer electronics and kind of everything in between. And furniture is great because it lasts. It's something that when you make it, you use materials that are durable. These materials like live with you in your home or in your office. And over time, they really kind of net out to have a long life, and you get value, and you feel good about the materials you use. A lot of them are natural woods or steel. When you're using polymers, it's meant to last for 25 years. It's not a disposable bottle, and it's not something that is a consumable in that sense. So we love furniture. So we're always trying to figure out, like, how do we take the same idea as furniture and carry it forward and carry it through not just the design, but the business side of all the different companies we engage with. So the last few years, we've been doing products with amazing impact. Medical industry, working on a product that really transforms access, but not only is this a portable ultrasound, it is distributed in a model that's a lease model. So it's not actually owned. It's a product as a service. It's taken back at end of life, they refurbish, and over the course of time, they'll replace it with a new one. So they control their own cycle and product life cycle. So it's basically, imagine if all the drink bottles in the world were reclaimed by Nestle and Coke, and they went out and took them all back. It'd be pretty amazing. Hard to do it on that scale. That's why we need to change and get away from bottles. But Babe is a great example of a complex product going into a circular model. And then if you move down the line, these products all have some sort of environmental impact. The nutshell cooler is made with coconut fiber to replace foam. So and the coconut fiber is replaceable. So it's a serviceable product that goes out into the world. People engage with it beyond just the utility. It lives with them, and it has the impact ingrained inside of it. And Eddie soap dispenser, we removed plastic and made a metal pump system that uses aluminum bottles versus plastic. And aluminum is a much different recycling stream, holds its value, pretty much infinitely recyclable versus plastic, which has a limited engagement. And then the last two are using design and producing products that actually conserve materials. So we're conserving water with Sunny and Nebbia. And then the last bucket of products is thinking about cutting edge technology and performance. So how do we create products that have the performance but also last over time? And then that performance isn't fleeting. So it's not like we talked about phones in 3 years, they're obsolete. How do you make products that can work cross-platform and stay current for as long as possible? And the idea is how do you make these more like furniture? How do you bring them back and say, how does this have staying power beyond just the technical aspect? So that's a little overview of some of the things that we've been working on over the years. But here's the big kicker that's been really pushing us to engage differently with clients. So obviously everything decays. Some things more quickly than others, and we're seeing the addiction to what we've been doing. We're seeing the ocean islands and plastic. We see it out in the world. We see the impact. And some of the things is, Nichole mentioned this, I think we're all current on this. This is a stat that keeps coming back, that we only recycle 9% of plastic. And then if you dive a little deeper, it's 9% is recycled, and what happens to the rest? And you see as it kind of trickles down, it is like disposed of. And it's frightening. If I got a 9% on my test in school, I probably wouldn't pass my, wouldn't move on to my professional studies. So where does the other 91% go? And an alarming thing is we eat it. So we're actually consuming about 21 grams a month, and it's terrifying. So it's not about like recycle more. We have to think about replace and change. And that's really where it comes back to circularity. Not just putting it out in the world. There's like a one-way street now. We produce products and we send them out, people buy them, and it's like, well, it's all on you. And it goes back to what Nichole had up with the life cover. Like, just throw it out. And we're still just throwing things out. Even if it's like a nice thing, like a car or a television, we still dispose of it. So we have to think about what we need to do. This is the movement that I love. So thinking about circular economy, there's a lot of this in the news around how do we change, how do we bring manufacturing back, how do we how do we become more efficient in shipping products, how do we manufacture locally, and it's what I think is really interesting and what I flagged here is that it calls out like design is a piece and then all these other players. And in order for this to work, I just highlighted design needs to be really talking to everyone, but the same goes for all the other. They all have to actually point to each other. So I just like to highlight that as a point. And what's really important here is we're not just trying to say like everyone's doing it wrong. We're trying to fix it. And so through design, we have to actually engage with the business side, not just looking at the end use or just a material. It's a full engagement. And I think that all of us that we're talking today are trying to find ways to do that. So I've accepted it in terms of how to do it. And then I think we're all going to talk about how to do it more. So that's it for now.
And just to, we're going to do a slight schedule change. We're going to have Dan come up and do his little prezzo, but then we're actually going to break for lunch and then do the conversation right after lunch when everyone has full tummies. So excited to have Dan Kennedy joining us from Ronin PD Lab, where he's a studio principal and partner. They're an international product development firm kind of focused here, or based here in San Francisco. And Dan leads Ronin's sustainable design team, who focuses on developing circular economy solutions. So really doing this all day long, in and out. Happy to hear from you, Dan.
All right, hello. Hello. I'm here from Ronin. We're a San Francisco-based engineering firm, product development firm. And we use what we call a sustainable product development process. It looks a lot, it maps to the typical product development process that most hardware developers have seen and are familiar with, from definition through to mass production. But we're adding some steps here now in service of some of these goals that Bret and Nichole have talked about. So the first thing we do is we ask the question, does this product deserve to exist? And that's a really subjective question. But literally, every time a prospective client comes to us and says, hey, we've got something that we want you to help us take it to market, we take the prompt, we put it in our Ronin Slack channel, and we hashtag DIDTE, does it deserve to exist? And you'd be it's amazing how much conversation that usually ignites. And so we really need for the project team to be unanimous in agreeing that, yes, This product deserves to be out there in the world. And then once we've decided that, we go through our process, and we have some other steps that I won't address today, but the one I want to talk about is design for disassembly. And disassembly is important because it enables circularity. And this is the very thing that Bret and Nichole and I have all been talking about here. We consider circularity as reducing harmful waste by reusing products and materials for as long as possible. We're really trying to extend the life of products in order to reduce waste. So there are a number of ways to do this. We can repair, refurbish, remanufacture, or recycle. Now, regardless of how we do it, design for disassembly is a critical piece of this puzzle because we need to be able to access all of that value that's baked into these products. And there are, if we kind of lay it out from the top being a very tight circular loop of repair down to recycling at the bottom, it's important to note that the tighter the loop, the better. That's our goal, because we're going to incur lower costs that way. Less energy will be incurred, will be used as well. Whereas with recycling, you have much higher costs, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through here. But in an effort to reduce waste, we really want to preferentially move towards repair. So in order to really do this effectively, we're engineers, so we need to quantify. We need to measure our success. How well are we doing? Are we really doing the best job we can? And for that, we need some sort of metrics. And the process that we're using right now is design disassembly mapping. And this is something that was developed at the Technical University in Delft, Netherlands. They currently have the largest sustainable design faculty in the world, soon to be challenged by Stanford, I think. But they applied this technique to a vacuum cleaner at Philips. There was a graduate from the TU Delft program, Francesco De Fazio, who moved on to Philips and applied disassembly mapping to this vacuum cleaner. And it's basically a visual map of the process of disassembly. So we're looking at forces involved, what tools are required, how many steps, how long does each step take, and we can map it out visually, and we can start to see hotspots. Okay, this whole area here, if we're building something, for example, from the bottom up, assembling it, and actually I need to get to these motor brushes that need frequent service that are buried way down in there, we don't want to have to go through that whole process of disassembling everything. So instead what we do is we do something called clustering. So everything above that product or that part, that component that receives frequent servicing, we kind of bind it together with its own subassembly. And just by moving a few screws, we can impact the architecture so that you can very quickly access those parts that need to be serviced most frequently. Another touch point for us is the Maker's Bill of Rights. This is something that we actually have up on our wall in our office in San Francisco. It's just a great resource to have. Screws better than glues. That's a great one. You know, we can't be gluing our products together, otherwise we can't take them apart without the use of a heat gun. And it's just a real pain to do that, so better use screws. So this is a great resource. Another one is the iFixit Self-Repair Manifesto. Similar tips that are helpful. And we really love their tagline, if you can't fix it, you don't own it. As an engineer, I'm like, yes, totally. But actually, it also raises the question, well, who should own it? Should I own it? Should I own the product as a consumer? Because then I bear the burden of dealing with it at end of life. What if the manufacturer were to own it and we were to engage with it through a subscription service? I mean, that's a great model. I think it's really worth looking at, and some of our clients are looking at that very thing. So that's a great one. So Apple was, just last year, they were widely criticized by the right to repair movement for blocking access to repair. They were saying, oh, you can't touch it unless you have a license, you're going to void the warranty. Within a short year, they've actually just recently, last week, released or launched this self-service repair store. And you can get the parts there, you can get manuals for disassembly, and you can buy the spare part, have it shipped to you. You can also rent this toolkit, which is necessary for a lot of these steps. And the reason why is that Apple still hasn't had the chance to apply a lot of this design for repairability to their architecture. They're still kind of stuck in this old mode of gluing everything together. So that's what you need, is this repair kit. But it's pretty amazing that they're taking the steps to do this. Hopefully, in time, they will apply design for disassembly to their product, and that toolkit will go away. So we propose that this magic pebble, this ideal that we've been said, oh, this is what you want a pebble. And you can't figure out how to get in there, but it's so seamless and beautiful. Well, if you can't figure out how to access it or take it apart, then why would you buy it? If you can't fix it, you don't own it, right? So looking at products and seeing, can I find a way to get in here? I mean, that's the first thing I think about when I go to buy something. I want to make sure I can fix it. Have you ever hunted for snaps in here and damaged the housing in the process? I do that all the time. It's very frustrating. So we need a different way. I think we need a new paradigm that doesn't hide the screws under feet, the rubber feet and labels. We would always do this. Oh, hide it under a label, and we can't do that anymore. We have to celebrate and communicate to the user that this is how you disassemble this thing. It's really important, because if the user can figure it out, then the factory can figure it out if we end up remanufacturing or doing any of those things. So I think that's it.
Thank you.
Well, just to start off, like, I think some of these intentions and goals have been circulating for quite some time, and a lot of I know your individual practices are also largely shaped by what clients are asking for too, and what people are coming to you with too. I'm curious to hear about if you've seen trends in people prioritizing circularity or sustainability when they're coming to you with briefs these days, or how that's kind of what sort of almost like market conditions you're seeing in the client landscape.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. For us, I would say about 90% of the projects that have come through our door, even just things that we're pitching potential clients, I'd say they're 90% sustainability focused these days.
As the top priority or something?
Yes, some part of their business model is looking at circularity and sustainability.
Right.
That's awesome. We aren't seeing such high numbers, but I think that's the challenge ahead for us, is we really need to try to draw those people out. What we are seeing, one trend with those folks who have made sustainability a mission, part of their mission, they tend to be millennials or they're younger founders.
Yep.
It's table stakes for them to really be mission driven and do something sustainable. That's one trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree to that, and also drawing it in. We're getting a lot. I think the main thing that we try to do is amplify. So if they're coming in we have this idea to be more sustainable, we're well, how do you take that and do more outside of what they're doing as a product? How do they do it in their business? How do they collaborate with partners and take it to the next level? And so that's always the challenge with us. Even if it's a big company, it's okay, we get it. You have an internal, sustainable department, and we're going to engage with them. But can we do more?
Yep.
And laddering it up like that is always fun.
That's cool. I think sometimes, definitely personally myself and some other people in the room, might be future clients as well. What would you tell other people how to be a good client, or what's a good brief to you that actually lets you do this job? Because even before sustainability was or circularity was a priority, you already had to solve a ton of hard, difficult problems, and then just adding circularity on as another one is almost not fair or something. You have something's got to give.
I'd love to take this. We've got this life cycle assessment tool, and it's a really low-lift tool. It's literally just a spreadsheet, and we love to use it really early. In fact, sometimes we use it to vet projects. And if we could give that to potential founders to do that ahead of time, their homework, because sometimes we also get projects that haven't had that applied, and they come to us and it's we do due diligence, and it's no, this doesn't make sense. I know you're trying to address this problem, but in so doing, you're absorbing all this other energy impact and all this stuff. So that would be a great thing. We actually have this tool that we've developed. We want to release it.
Awesome.
So actually, if anyone's interested in receiving it, it's literally just a Google spreadsheet.
Yes.
We use a equalizer database for the data. Let's see, I don't know if there's any way to share out email address,
Yeah.
but if we could do that.
For sure.
Yeah, dan.kennedy@roninpdlabs.com. We'll put you on our email list, and this quarter we intend to share that out. So if we could share that with founders, that would be brilliant.
Yes, I'd love to have that and share it all the time. So thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, what else makes a good client for you, or like what would you push people on?
Being receptive to pushing beyond what they expected, like trying to lead a category, not just with their product or their service, but trying to figure out other ways to have a ripple effect, mostly with like seeing how they can challenge and stand out. And it's not always by the core product, it's by the mission. So like trying to tie the mission back to doing more. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think for us, it's really about being good humans and that personal connection. I really believe that building great products comes out of great relationships, and when you respect each other and take care of each other, and there's enough trust that you can really, push things with the client, and you can have the freedom to say what you believe, and that they actually respect that and listen to it and follow it. I think those are the great clients that really stand out. And if I don't get that feeling when we are pitching and having conversations, we will just turn the work away.
That's awesome. So once you kind of get past that point, everyone's on the same page, kind of priorities are aligned, you feel like you can really work together. There's just sometimes hard truths where you like fail at balancing all the trade-offs like that exist in a product. And I think like to some degree, like we've all been banging our heads against some of these things for years and years and years now too. But I feel like we're collectively making some progress in some places, and we're starting to learn processes and tools that are actually producing results now too. Like I think that lifecycle analysis tool you mentioned is like a great example of that. Do you guys have other examples of either like processes or tools that you're finding like working to share that maybe other people haven't heard about or should tune in or think about incorporating into their process as well?
Not necessarily a tool, but a network, like trying to connect with people who know more than us. Great example, like having partners that we can say, hey, I don't know the answer to this. Who do I go to? And having that network and the Rolodex, and then connecting with other organizations. Like I'm working with Circularity.org out of Australia to try to help them emphasize how we change by doing, not just talking about it. Right, which is always the hard part. Like circularity is not a new concept. It's been around for a long time, and we've been talking about it for a long time. And that was the first thing I said to him: is that like I'm happy to be involved, but I have to do it. I have to like start doing it. And that's like kind of pushing on the projects that we have in the studio now. I'm trying to get them to hook in, and it's not fully there for people to just plug into. So we have to start building pieces. But I think the network is key.
That's really a good point.
And I think having great engineering teams, I think we share a partner here, that it really helps us to push the boundaries with our clients in terms of sustainability, the life cycle analysis, but also just us being able to guide our clients to an engineering partner who puts that as a top priority has really been key. So we're lucky to have great partners.
Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, and we, we're always learning about whether the impacts of our actions. Just looking back at what we were doing 10 years ago, it's like, oh, no more of that. And so we have to be willing to risk failure and to learn alongside our clients, which is kind of antithetical to the idea of a consulting firm as the experts and know it all. We know everything. That's why we're being asked to help out on the project. In this case, we're all learning together. Yeah. So it's got to be kind of acknowledged at the outset that that's the process we're in. Is that it's a collective learning process.
Yep. I think that's so valuable. I think we've all had instances where we were trying to do good, and maybe you did partial good, but also had some additional unintended negative consequences too. And there's almost been a little bit of a ethos of pointing out, being like, oh, see, gotcha, that wasn't as green as you thought, or something. And there's some of that can get fairly negative. And I think as a group of a community of product developers, we have to be very accepting of those unintended consequences, and in some ways share them and celebrate them and excuse them, so that we're all making progress together.
And that's where what Nichole's talking about with connecting with, is this a client where are we aligned in our values and our way of working? That's super important. You establish that firm foundation. You can evolve together without all the, oh, we should have done it this way or whatever. It's like, we're working together here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You don't want to have to beat sustainability into your clients. You want them coming to you with that aligned vision, and then also making sure we have a whole network of partners, like Bret mentioned, and also like sharing information. Like with Ronin, we have materials spreadsheet that our team and their team filter information into, and tools that we share back and forth so that we can collaborate. I think eventually it'd be great to do that among other design studios, just so that we all kind of like build up that awareness and learn from our mistakes and learn what is actually happening out there. What how we I'm happy to share with Bret's team, other ID
absolutely,
studios out there, because I think we all want to make sure that we can save this planet for the future.
Yeah. I agree. I think that there's like a truth that has to be uncovered, and we don't know the information. Sometimes we find it late, and we're like, well, I thought this was recyclable. And it's like, well, it is. The material is recyclable, but no one recycles it.
Right.
And it's like, that's just mind-blowing to a designer. Like, but we thought it was perfect. And it turns out it's terrible.
Yep.
And I think there's, going back to what you were talking about in terms of blockchain, there's like, you can embed the truth in the information, which is what I'm excited about when you talk about blockchain and like where crypto's going and all this. It's this like deep-rooted and readily available to everyone, so you know if it's actually true and where it came from. You can see the source versus like, I posted a picture, I told you it's true, but I photoshopped that picture. And I think that's what with materials, it's the same thing. Like there's a lot of spin, like bioplast, where you mix in biofiber in polymer, and it sounds amazing, like using less plastic, but it's ultimately garbage at the end. You can't recycle it, you can't process it. So like that kind of information is spun, and I think getting to like the real facts is critical.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point. There's just so much greenwashing out there, and there's just so much that you think is sustainable because it's marketed that way. But I mean, you find out that the speckled plastic that they used, they actually had to add, they took 100% recycled plastic and added virgin plastic to get the speckles in there. Like stuff like this is happening, and consumers aren't even aware of it. So I think we need to learn and share all of that information, and call people out for doing things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think one of like Saint Rams's commandments around honesty and design is really interesting in that regard too. Because I still see, this is like a fairly like academic thought, but there's lots of cases where we're still trying to shoehorn circular or sustainable designs into unsustainable forms and shapes and kind of look and feel of products. So, we're trying to get post-consumer plastic that looks like a virgin white plastic because we're trying to like have sustainable products imitate those products. Sure. And there's lots of those unintended consequences. It's like to do that, there's like kids crawling over mountains of trash to find plastic and hand polishing them to get them to be virgin white too. And there's all those situations too. So I'm really excited about kind of the future of industrial design, where we can let those materials that are just different sometimes and are just fundamentally sustainable materials actually like express themselves more directly and let people know that's that's what those products are, and it had different priorities as opposed to trying to make them look like the old products that were not prioritized like that.
I agree 100%. I feel like we need to appreciate imperfection and celebrate it, and as a unique property of something that is inherently renewable and therefore flawed in some way. Maybe we want everything to be so perfect and so clean. And even to the point of putting films to protect polished surfaces, like we need to. I love to see the patina on things personally, And it's and I'd love for us to celebrate that more in new products, so that they can become old and still look new again, like meeting our expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you guys bumped into any other instances of that, of like sustainable materials starting to like express themselves differently, or even kind of like higher level product characteristics or form languages that are really like emerging because of the sustainable materials?
I think just kind of looping back about the perpetuation of like recyclability and the ocean plastic point. I just want to touch on that first. It's like we had a client, Eddie, come to us and had the model of using aluminum bottle as a way to transport soap versus using plastic bottle. And so we loved it, but then they were like, oh, we want to make the outer vessel pump out of recycled polymer. And I kind of dropped down the hammer. I said, why would you do that? Because you're going to perpetuate ocean plastic. You're saying it's okay. You're going to use the material that's being harvested and saying like, well, we should keep harvesting. We should keep making that. And it kind of perpetuates the problem. So I think it's with the challenge then was figuring out how to make it with metal and castings and make it more durable. And it has inherent flaws in it. Like metal isn't as perfect as plastic. The way the castings come together, there's a gap. And so it's like not plastic, which is actually a great thing. You know, and you feel it when you touch it too. And it's like this engagement that's really pure.
Awesome. That's a great example. So one last maybe point I'd like to bring up, I almost have a little bit of a bone to pick sometimes with repairability, because it is a good thing, but it's oftentimes diametrically opposed to reliability. And so in some ways planned obsolescence is like Soylent Green or something. It's people. And so when you're making things repairable, you're giving the ability to repair a phone that's 5 years old, but do people want to use a 5-year phone? And so it's actually kind of consumer desire for the new, better thing that actually changes the equation on that. And so when you make something easier to repair in 5 years, sometimes you're making it less reliable for 100% of your customers at the beginning too. And that can sometimes have a bigger environmental impact as well. And so to change the calculus on that, sometimes I think we have to design products that are actually desirable and people want longer, not just that last longer too. And so that's, I feel like a big part of that burden / challenge is on your shoulders too, and that's really exciting to me.
I love products that are modular, that have modularity built in, and that I think solves a lot of the problems you're talking about. Because what do we want from a new phone? We want the higher pixel, whatever, the higher resolution camera. We want the longer life battery, all this stuff. The Fairphone is an example of a phone that is not yet available in the US. I think it's a European phone, but hopefully will come here soon. It's designed for repairability and modularity. You can break out the components, get the better camera when it comes out. And then you retain that case that you know and love. And some people wrap it in the leather case, and it's like this thing that got your imprints of your pocket and stuff. I love that, and I also get the newness of having just that little camera. That's all I really needed was the higher resolution camera, for example.
Cool. That's a great example.
Yeah. I think it's also product specific, or where you use it and how you use it. Like appliances at home. You don't really want to get a new washing machine or a new dryer or a dishwasher. You want them to last. You want to be able to service them. And when they do break, servicing them is more expensive than actually getting a new one, right? So I think that's the kind of balance, and I'll go to TVs. The bezel's really small now, and it's getting thinner. But do we need it thinner? Is it taking up that much space? Do I need my TV to be less than a 1/4 inch? And I think there's a bit of a trade-off there. Would I rather have something that could be serviced, or I could just upgrade the actual display and not have to throw out the whole thing?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we have to balance it. Target things that are readily available, and then with phones and things, it's a little bit harder. But I think if it's not right to repair, it's designed to come apart. It's ready to put to bed.
I also think what Dan mentioned earlier about consumers not owning products anymore, and that being the burden of the company that's making it, is how things should be. Because consumers, you have to make it easy for them, or that barrier to getting something recycled is so high. It's just so much easier to throw something in the trash. But if they don't own it, they ship it back and get a new one. I mean, that's so much better. And from what I've been seeing within certain clients, I think that business model and that mentality is really shifting a lot. And luckily Europe is also enforcing certain things, so there's a good influence coming there.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I think that's good for now. I think that really appreciate you guys sharing all the kind of the inside peek at your individual practices, and it's been a great conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.